Okay, I'm going to continue with this Special Education Series 101 with regards to behavior because that is the subject that I'm sort of on, but it's very complex and there's a lot of nooks and crannies. In fact, it's one of the probably the biggest area with regards to issues that my office deals with, regardless of the state that we're practicing in. Um, it ends up consuming a lot of school resources. It ends up, and I'm talking about monetarily too, because they got to pay attorneys. They got to pay the parent attorneys. They got to sit there and pay their board attorneys. There's a lot of board policy that centers around behavior. Um, there's, a lot of concerns governmentally that have come out with regards to behavior, student behavior, to the point where we've got some systemic problems with regards to the concept of the school to prison pipeline, which is a real thing. Um, Now you sit there and you say, well, not in my school. Well, yeah, no crap. Guys, it varies from region to region, school to school, and by no means should any of you, and there's a lot of educators on this page, and some administrators, by no means should any of you internalize what I'm saying as being some kind of swipe at you as an educator, okay, or an administrator. It's not. We're trying to learn together. And I'm just pointing out the perspective and what we see from my office in multiple states so that we can sit there and learn together and try to figure out how we can overcome this and make these learning environments better places for all children. Because these problems aren't going to go away. And yes, the law is there. There are civil rights protections. There are mechanisms out there. The science is out there that tells us the proper and appropriate and positive way that we can sit there and develop young minds and in all areas, not just academics, that tends to be the focus of education because that denotes, in our minds that, it's just academics when in reality, education encompasses globally everything. And so social emotional learning is an educational performance area that is covered under special education, under 504. It's a very relevant area. Tends to be diminished big time by public schools with regards to teaching. Now, on the flip side, it's a huge part of the punitive side of education. And sort of the idea that the child should already be coming into school, behaviorally attuned and able and, ready to work with no issues with regards or deficits with regards to social emotional learning. But yet we give A through Fs in academics. We acknowledge response to intervention that kids are at varying degrees with regards to reading and writing, for example. But yet we don't have that kind of patience. We don't have that kind of analysis and understanding that every child, whether they have a disability, whether they whatever factor, it seems like that's the aspect that gets lost in translation all the time, is that we don't acknowledge that social and emotionally children are going to be at different levels. And therefore we must alter how we address that as adults and as parents in order for it to be working in the way that it needs to. And if that means that we need to change the entire structure of education in order to accomplish that, quite frankly, what do I think is probably the most important part of a community's duty to its citizens? I think it starts with social emotional development and communication. I think the academic aspect is actually a third tier concern, that if you achieve the social emotional well-being of the child in their development, along with their ability to communicate and communicate well as far as their thoughts and be able to reason and be able to also use the skills of social emotional development to monitor their own communication. And I'm talking about personal responsibility because I'm not a real big fan of having external factors. even though I'm an attorney, external factors would include law, because I think law is there as a guide, like banks of a river, okay? But at the same time, I'm not a real big fan of law. I'm a real big fan of personal responsibility. I'm a real big fan of educating people and then expecting that they police themselves, and they monitor their own behaviors. That is why this country, in a theory, is so great, is that it works off of those precepts, okay? Where there's an expectation, or there used to be an expectation of personal responsibility once that education has been delivered, and then those expectations are there, okay? And I think that that's where everything's been jumbled. And quite frankly, that's where a lot of you guys disagree with me, is that a lot of you, when it comes to varying things that are out there, let's say COVID, and the state response to COVID, we're going to disagree on that, because I do expect people, once they're provided the correct information, I expect them to police themselves. And because I just don't think that people out there want to get sick and they don't want to die. So I would expect that they would go, okay, I think it's good to wash my hands. I think it's good to, distance. All right. But as far as having somebody coming in and saying, I will force you to do that, for no other reason than I don't trust you, well, then, guys, that's where we spin out of control. That's where we disagree, because I think that there's got to be an expectation, as citizens, that other people, sort of a live and let live kind of situation, and that we don't trust each other anymore. And because we don't trust each other on a base level, then that's where all this convoluted law and these rules and, us tattling on each other because, somebody's not wearing a mask, that's where it spins out of control. And so I do take sort of a, isn't it amazing that I'm about to use the word extreme when it comes to civil rights? But that's the kind of environment I feel like I'm living in right now, is an extreme when it comes to things of that nature. That it's now an extreme position to believe in individual liberty and individual responsibility, personal responsibility, to where, there's not somebody using aggression, force, and threat to condition human behavior, which it doesn't work, guys. It's a short-term solution, but what it does is it festers and it creates bullies. What it also does is it creates this tier of abuse all the way down to, you kicking your dog. And I don't have time to get into that whole idea, guys, but when you have power above you, no matter what level you're at, and it continues to oppress, then the resulting effect is a domino effect, to where that oppression ends up meeting this oppression, which ends up meeting this oppression, on down, and you end up taking it out on the things around you, or the people around you, and that's just not a positive. Okay, and I can see that happening in my practice when I go in to try to solve these problems. So much of it is power abuse, and power abuse at varying levels. It ends up fostering a negative environment. It's sort of like mold, guys. It can only survive in certain environments. And it's the same way with negative human behavior, to where it's perpetuated because the environment in which it is allowed to grow exists. And so there was a time, and we always go through these cycles of what tends to be in the spotlight with regards to education. And a few years ago, it was really bullying. Bullying was a big concern, and it was a big issue. I'm not saying that it still isn't. It is. It's just been clouded by other things that have become sort of spotlight issues. So when it came to the bullying, what I ended up sort of determining or theorizing on my own, just because of the various cases and the areas or the regions where it was occurring, what I ended up coming to the conclusion, my own conclusion, is that there is bullying that is produced in the home environment, but that is going to be far more rare, just simply because in your home environment, other than the child being bullied by the parents, which is just bad parenting, but then as that result, the child then, once again, this disparate power differential to where that child now takes it out, because that's been the example on them, and then they turn around and find vulnerable individuals that they perceive are less than them, and then they bully those individuals. That does happen, and that absolutely can happen within these home environments. And in large part, what you end up also finding out is most of these parents that are bullying their children are being bullied, and that's the example that they've received either from their parents or from their employer or from some other aspect or perceived power above them. It is a trickle-down effect. But where I ended up determining that most of the bullying was sourced was inside the education system itself. And it was very spotty, because there would be schools that had excellent principals, and excellent assistant principals, to the point where we didn't see the bullying issues in those schools, because the environment and the leadership within that school just was not conducive for producing bullies. Now, if I ended up having bad principals, bad assistant principals, then we had absolute systemic bullying issues within that school environment. And that's where everybody sort of misdirected, and they were like, well, it must be the parents. And I'm like, no, because I don't have problems within this same school district. I don't have a problem at this school, or this school, which exists within the same community. And, you sit there and you go, well, it must be education level of those parents. No, I would have upper middle income schools where we had serious bullying issues. So it's not some, crass judgment of these education levels that somehow, lower educated or blue collar families, somehow are bullies, when quite frankly, they don't have the power. All right. Like I said, power, it's a power differential. And so, it's interesting watching humans, because you can sit there and pinpoint who the bullies are in our society today, especially with this election. It's fascinating to watch, because the bullies don't see themselves as bullies. In fact, they tend to be perched on top of their moral superiority, that what they're doing is justified, and their behavior on social media toward other people that they disagree with. I mean, it's repugnant. It's repugnant behavior, but they don't see themselves as the bullies. And if I'm correct, they're going to be rather shocked here in a few days, because I'm making this video before the 2020 elections. But just, people that are being bullied tend not to say anything, and they tend to vote the opposite of what the bullies are pressing them to do. It's a weird phenomenon, guys. It's just so strange. But watching that, like I said, schools are a little microcosm of what's going on a big picture. But I can tell you, a great principal, a great assistant principal, when it comes to behavior, and when it comes to how they set the example and tone within their school, destroys that little environment where bullying is sourced. Okay, just like mold. If you have sunlight, if you have dryness, it just can't exist. All right, it's the same thing with bullying. And so I can tell you, and a lot of you are going to get upset at me for this, because you're going to not agree. Okay, and that's fine. You are absolutely entitled to not agree with me, but we need to start having these discussions on behavior. I'm moving toward the behavior plan, the purpose of the behavior plan. I'm the scrutiny of zero tolerance policies, so we can sit there and have a broader perspective of how we solve these problems within our education system. And how do you become a good leader? Guys, I can't sit there and tell you that there's some magic uh, uh, training program to sit there and become a good leader. I think that in a lot of ways you just are. All right. I grew up with a guy that he's a friend of mine. I mean, we grew up together. I mean, I grew up in the same small town. So did he. Um, and I tell you what, he's on this page, and he's a principal in an elementary school in Texas. And I can't tell you, um, he is loved. He's respected. He is, but he's always been a good guy, you know. So he's always been him. And so I can't sit there and explain to you, you know, what differentiates. I mean, you know, if he happens to watch this, I would love his 2 cents, you know, because I'm not a principal. I'm not an assistant principal. You know, my job, I get to go in there and just scrutinize everyone else and then try to come up with solutions. You know, so I can tell you with all of the varying um, factors that come in, I wouldn't want the job. All right, because you have to deal with a union, and depending on the strength of the union, I mean, there's not a lot with some of your employees. There's not a lot you can do because they just don't care. Some of them, all right, because they feel like they're protected. They feel like they're entitled to sit there and to kick against the pricks, you know, to use that term, to sit there and just be oppositional because they can. You know, you're not going to tell me what to do because my rules say this, and you know, it's juvenile, all right. But that exists within some of our schools to where teachers are the problem. Okay, that's one of the factors. Then you have administrative pressures from the Board of Education and the superintendent with regards to what's being spent, the expectations to do well on your high stakes testing, which is that third external factor that you have every Student Succeeds Act, and you still have the high stakes testing that they were supposed to get rid of during No Child Left Behind, but they're still there. So therefore, what that does is it incentivizes the principal to do well on a multiple choice test, which then has negative impacts with regards to some principals that are sitting there identifying which student population is dragging their score down, which is one of those things that didn't feed into the prison or school to prison pipeline, because it was one of those things that started back then as a mechanism to get rid of the student populations that would hurt the school score. So there's all of these different factors. So, you know, then you have student population or segment that that they're not sent to school fully fed. The parents you know, are absent and not participatory. You know, all of those things work, and you got it's a balancing act to where you don't want to abuse the introduction of some of the other governmental agencies there, like CPS or DHR. There are some schools, bad leaders, once again, or very ignorant teachers that do not understand the balance between the two, overusing these other things. And once again, they're used as forms of bullying, forms of compliance, forms of force and aggression. Those are bad schools, guys, and those are the schools that, once again, you may have temporary student obedience, but it's fleeting. It's very temporary. Humans don't work under those parameters. They just don't. I mean, you just wait. All of this stuff with regards to these draconian COVID rules, that you're already seeing people that were okay with that stuff 3 months ago, and there's going to be a tipping point to where nobody's okay with it. Well, there's always going to be that segment that, you know, love love the oppression of it all, but most people will take a common sense approach and be sort of okay with everything. I'm not one of those people. I ask the questions out of the gate. I asked these questions back in March, and I didn't agree with them then. Felt there was a better way to handle this stuff. I still have that position. But there's personalities like me that end up irritating most of humanity because, we're the loudmouths that ask the questions, okay? It's like Divergent, okay? There's a bunch of different personalities. We all have to live in this world and in this country together. I'm just telling you, I'm admitting to all of you right now that I'm just one of those personalities, the loudmouth that asks a lot of questions, that everybody else is like, oh my God, can he just shut up? I get that. But I think that there's a benefit, or I think that there's a need for people like me. But also, I acknowledge that there's all these different kinds of personalities, and they all have their role to play and their benefit. But I'm just saying that draconian policies, whether they're inside your school, whether they're inside your community, your state, your country, it doesn't matter. Aggression, force, threat, those things are never long-term solutions, guys. That's oppression. And humans, if you just look at historical examples, they want to breathe free. They don't want to be commanded, being told what to do, threatened. They don't. We fought wars over that kind of stuff. People are clamoring to come to this country. So those of you out there that think that the United States is some kind of cesspool of systemic this and systemic that, you need to open your eyes, because if it was truly that way, everybody in the world would not be clamoring to come here. They would be avoiding it like the plague. So if you look at where all of these people are coming from, they're coming from corrupt and oppressive and violent countries. And they all perceive that this country is not that. And we have our problems, yeah, but we can work those out. We always have been able to do that. So I don't see the glass as half full. I see it as, or half empty. I am a positive type of thinker when it comes to, we can correct our problems. We can acknowledge those problems, but then not sit there and drag everybody down with a bad attitude, or think that things have to be solved with more law or more threats or more aggression, because that's just not the way. Our children's first exposure or example of government is inside of our public schools, guys. What example are they getting? And if they're getting a bad principal with bad leadership, or a bad board of education, or a bad superintendent, that is a bad leader, that believes in threat, that believes in force, that believes in aggression, those kind of things, what kind of citizen do you think is going to come out the back end? Huh? In these inner city schools, to where, for example, Birmingham City Schools in Alabama, such a hypocritical group of board members, but it's, I'm not going to sit there and say what I really want to say. My point being is that, those children have such a different experience from the time they enter school in inner city or in the Birmingham City School District, as opposed to just a few miles up the street. You have Homewood and Mountain Brook schools. Totally different experience. Next door, Trustful, totally different experience. Now, why is that? Are the kids different? I mean, demographically, yeah. But do I think that the children themselves are different? Do I think humans are different in what it is that they want and they desire? I don't. But at the same time, they have such a disparate experience in their environment. And so much of that is perpetuated within the schools. And anytime I've had cases inside Birmingham City, it's been very frustrating to me, because what I always say to them is, nobody ever wants to listen to me, but, you need to get rid of all of these features that make your schools look like prisons, because they don't exist a couple miles up in Mountain Brook or Homewood, to where they have metal detectors, and just teeming with cops. Birmingham City Schools actually went to federal court a few years ago because the ACLU, or maybe it was Southern Poverty Law Center, one of them sued Birmingham City because of the use of mace, pepper spray, with the students. Something you don't see a couple miles up or in any of the other surrounding schools. And Birmingham City Schools actually fought that, saying that it was a necessary tool for the police to use in order to control the student population. Well, there you go. And so if the attitude coming out of the gate for the administration is that we need to control with the use of violence, with the use of aggression, the student population, then what do you think is going to be the result? Guys, any kind of force is going to result in an equal a response, okay? So every time the school administration ratchets it up, over a little bit of time, it's going to be ratcheted up on the back end as far as a form of resistance, as a form of rebellion. And then what ends up happening is that the government ends up ratcheting it up a little bit more. And this is the result. Because humans don't respond well to threats, aggression, and oppression. They just don't. I don't care how young you are. I don't care what your age is. Those are the examples set by the government school there in Birmingham City. And so therefore they fought that in federal court, their use of pepper spray and mace against children that they deemed out of the gate, already judged, were needing this kind of behavior modification in the form of mace or pepper spray. Okay? Something that's not used a couple miles down the street. Wouldn't even be thought of being used. Now, you guys can sit there and come up with your reasons and your justifications. I mean, it's not systemic racism, because that's not what the administration who leads the school and makes the decisions. That's not the balance. So what is it that the perspective of the leaders with regards to how they view the community and how they view the parents and how they view the students? They have every power within that administration to change the system, to not have it be something that's a negative out of the gate and to where we make our school look more like a prison than a school. But have they made those changes? They have the power, they have the ability. They have not made those changes. So when I go in and represent, of course, I bring all that up. You know, and then as far as our settlement agreement, I try to create sort of an insulated bubble around my own client to where these factors don't penetrate the bubble that I've tried to create with my own client. And sometimes we're successful and sometimes we're not. But I've also had to learn over the years that I need to go back and go back and go back if these schools don't want to listen the first time or the second time. And some of these more difficult school systems that have that in their head, you know, that they're just so in love with their own power and their own force and their own aggression, that's the mechanism. I don't have a problem going back and back and back and back and hitting these schools over and over again for the same kid. That's how change happens at some point. I mean, you know, you would think that they would go, God, won't this guy go away? No. Because my client is a child and my client has differentiated learning issues or behavioral issues. But I'm not going to sit there and say that this child, who we all acknowledge needs help, when the system itself won't acknowledge that they are also a contributor and also a problem. And they have a higher duty and a higher responsibility to act differently. And they just don't want to do it. But yet I look at neighboring schools with good administrators and good principals and good assistant principals, and we just don't have those kind of issues. Because I can tell you with an absolute confident certainty that if I was to take a group of kids out of Birmingham City and move them to Mountain Brook, for example, they wouldn't have issues. There wouldn't be a need for those things. Why? Because they're treated with respect and they're treated like humans without that threat or that suspicion to where there's got to be a reaction and a response. There's an expectation within those schools that this is your community, this is your school, and these are your expectations. And then they just sort of expect the kids to rise and achieve that, regardless of race, religion, anything. It just is an expectation. And the kids, it's amazing, they rise. But that's sort of the idea behind unschooling or the Montessori, type of programs, where the expectations are set and then let the kids shock the hell out of us. Because kids naturally want to learn, guys. That's not a shock. So let me point out real quick where we're having or some of these systems to where you don't even think about it. But these systems that are used, these behavioral systems that are used inside these schools, I don't feel like they're positive, and I don't feel like they serve the purpose that, of course, the internet and the people that are selling these programs on Pinterest and anything else, I just don't. And, I know some teachers swear by it. They go, oh my gosh, it's such a wonderful tool. I disagree. It's going to be a wonderful tool for this small segment of your kids, but also those small segments of your kids, depending on all of these factors, invisible factors even, their personality. Because I wouldn't have done well with that kind of system, but other personalities do well with that system. You also have home life being a factor. You have all of these different things that would play into these factors. And there are people out there, I don't care if somebody calls me out, it doesn't bother me at all. Whereas there's other people that are my age that it's the most horrifying thing in the world to call them out publicly for whatever, for a mistake. But we don't treat children as individuals within the confines of some of these schools. And some of the teachers are bad leaders. They're bad leaders. They're bad human beings. And I'm not sitting there saying that the teachers that use the red light, green light type of program, like the one I just threw up on the screen right here, this red, yellow, green, okay? And down here, this one happens to be using little cutout kids, and this is another one. That's not, you guys can't see that. So let me get back to showing you the other one. Okay, why isn't the other one showing up? Oh, who knows? Okay. All right. So we'll stick with this one since that's the one that's showing up. Or are they separated? Maybe they're not. We'll see if it shows up now. Yes. Okay. So this is the second one. Okay. And this is the one I see that's most common, with little clips with the kids' names on them, to where they, if they're acting bad, then, the teacher will tell the child to publicly get up from their seat and move and clip down or clip up, depending on how they want to do it. But, there's so many aspects of this that aren't thought through with regards to behavior modification. And so these kind of things with regards to this negative consequence, once again, with a power authority being in the form of a government teacher, um, publicly humiliating, and then having that power differential, which of course, guys, we're always going to have that kind of system, in a civilized society. But what I'm arguing, is that there's a better way to do it, because I honestly believe that this kind of mechanism, these kind of programs actually create behavior problems and actually foster damage psychologically and emotionally to a lot of kids. And the teacher, with all the best intention and could be the greatest teacher in the world, may not see the internal damage done emotionally and psychologically to some of the children, because their personality types are just different. And they're not going to externally share. Those are the kids I represent, are the ones that externally share their unhappiness with this, because they'll end up melting down in the class for being clipped, down. And I have clients like that, that I tell you, at the end of the day, because the teacher ends up, on one of my cases I had, the teacher spent the last 30 minutes making the final determination of where the kids would end their day. Instead of everybody starting fresh, it would be on a week by week basis. So meaning at the end of the day that the teacher was taking into account and assessing each child's behavior the last 30 minutes before they went home. And the teacher would sit there and say, okay, Johnny, you need to move to yellow. And that's where the child starting the next day is on yellow or on red. And of course, in the daily note home, the parents, the mom had, admitted that before she sort of figured out the damaging impact of this, that, if he came home on red or yellow at the end of the day, that, he would catch hell at home, in the form of a spanking or having things taken away from him. And they thought that they were being collaborative and working with the school. But then we ended up finding out so many of these factors with regards to these behavior programs were so arbitrary. And, he has high functioning autism, and it just was such a negative way, for him, because he didn't like to be publicly called out. And so he would ask a lot of questions. And then if he was upset about being called out, then it ended up spiraling to where he would call them hypocrites, especially if he didn't get the reward that he felt like he should have gotten because he saw somebody else doing the exact same thing or something similar. And in his mind, there wasn't a difference. If you're going to reward that behavior, then I did the same thing. Why didn't you reward mine? And so his big motivation was, I am not going home on a yellow or a red because I'm going to get my ass torn off, when I get home. Which, of course, the parents didn't understand how all this system worked and how it wasn't necessarily uniform, and how there was, it was disparate, and he was calling it out as part of his disability, and as part of his personality. And then, he would end up getting in trouble for asking the questions. And then he end up getting, and then very irrationally, I guess if you want to call it, he would end up really having these meltdowns in the last 30 minutes, anxiety and all of these feelings, because he was so afraid he was going to go home on yellow or red. And there were more than a few times that the teacher, he was so disruptive in that 30 minutes, constantly probing, where am I? What's going on? What can I do to that the teacher would end up clipping him to a different color just because he was being annoying for that 30 minutes, trying to sort of see what the final verdict was. But to have this perpetuated into where you're starting your day on red the next day instead of a clean slate. So these things have no uniformity to them. And they can be so misused because of that power differential, and the fact that behavior, and how behavior is interpreted it varies so much depending on educator, depending on administrator, that there's not the same viewpoint of a child. And that's why I can sit there and settle a case, let's say in kindergarten, and everything's great in first grade, and then all of a sudden everything goes to hell in the second grade. And when the parents are like, oh my God, we had a great 2 school years, what is going on? And then I'm the one that has to sit there and say, look at everything and go, well, the thing that changed was the teacher. And the teacher has a different perspective and a different, was raised differently, has a different idea of discipline, and incorporates, let's say, a program like this, and within the class, and then institutes it differently than the kindergarten teacher did, because the kindergarten teacher also comes with her own individual ideas, was raised in a different environment, where the parents had a different approach, or maybe the school that teacher went to in elementary school that did things completely different. Those little nuances are huge, huge nuances, because how the teachers were raised in their own individual perspectives are then find their way into student discipline, not academics. So there tends to be a uniformity of how we teach social studies or science or math, but there's not a uniformity of how we teach social emotional learning, because each one of us had different experiences growing up, had different parents, lived in different environments, were exposed to different things. And those things end up creeping into how we teach other children's, other people's kids inside these classrooms. And so I didn't have a problem in kindergarten or first grade because those teachers had a different perspective and blended well with my client. I'm going to have that hiccup of a teacher that just has a different attitude and is more hard knocks and was raised differently. And that is not a conducive environment for my client, who needs that consistency, who had that consistency, and now they have something completely different, and it's going to cause disruptions. And that's where, good principals that are mindful and can see those differences in personality are there, and they move quickly to sit there and make those adjustments, so that child is removed from that class and they identify. And so there's some principals that know that in advance because they're good administrators and they see the different personality types that exist as far as the teachers. And they can sit there and say, well, this child has an IEP, needs that consistency because of the nature of their disability and how it manifests, especially with let's say, my client that had such an anxiety to this behavior process, to where in the future, a good principal would have said, yeah, that kid needs to be with this teacher. And then as far as their behavior plan, we're going to write in the behavior plan that he is not going to be on the classroom red light, green light program. And if he is, which we had to do that one year, to where we wrote in the behavior plan that because he wanted to participate in red light, green light, but he, according to what his parameters within his own head. And so we had to get really creative to be able to tie his reinforcement program to the red light, green light, but did it in such a way to where there were opportunities for him to always, end on green. And that reduced the behavior in his mind to the point where it didn't exist. He didn't really need a behavior plan, but yet this is what I'm going to get into, guys. The behavior plan isn't for my client. The behavior plan is a set of parameters to keep the system, the education system, the adults from injuring my client. The behavior plan is not for my client. It's an acknowledgement of the adults that he cannot follow the normal student conduct, the student code of conduct within the parameters that it's established. And so it's to protect my client from them. It's not to somehow, be some kind of an excuse for, inappropriate behavior. That's not what we're using it for. But we need to provide enough of a protective bubble around my client so that we can attack maladaptive or inappropriate social behavior by teaching replacement skills. But we've got to have an environment to where we can teach replacement skills without the constant threat and assault of punitive action in the meantime. And systems like this feed those problems. They're damaging psychologically and emotionally. There are better ways to do this. But this is, part two, I guess, of what I want to introduce, because, and if you haven't watched point one, when it comes to the whole discussion on rights and individual liberty, because you need to understand those concepts, because it feeds into this. It feeds into civil rights to the point where I strongly asserted, and I'm doing so now, that our Bill of Rights, our constitutional rights, are actually undemocratic. And they're undemocratic for a reason, guys, because the majority, either through apathy, where they don't see you at all, the majority will make decisions that will trample on a minority, regardless of what that minority position is. And so in a classroom where you have 20 kids, there's going to be one or two kids whose personalities are not conducive with the behavior of the majority. And so therefore that becomes the minority. And in that minority position, what can we do to where we can create a conducive environment that is inclusive for them? So you see, it doesn't have anything to do with race at that point. It doesn't have anything to do with gender. It doesn't have anything to do with ethnicity or religion. It's just human beings that are different, that are not necessarily within any kind of recognized majority within a classroom, for example, to where a system like this may work for, 15 of your 20 students. But out of the 5 where it doesn't work, one may publicly tell you that he doesn't like it or she doesn't like it. Okay? There's your vocal person that's like me, asking too many questions and never liking the answer and not wanting to conform. Not because I can't conform, but because you told me to. And I am one of those people, and I recognize that about myself. Getting help. I'm not. Okay. But with regards to, let's say, the other 4, they don't have the kind of personalities that are going to have them be boisterous and vocal about it. And they're going to suffer in silence, guys. They're going to suffer in silence. And it's going to do the damage up here. And then the other kids that are in class have a very poor example of visually seeing who's being corrected, which then creates these hierarchies within these classrooms of perceived superiority with regards to their behavior over other kids. And then it also reinforces these ideas of who can be bullied, who it's okay to bully. Guys, good intention ends up creating a lot of bad stuff, all right? And like I said, this is a well-intentioned, something that's uniform in a lot of schools. And it's well-intentioned. And a lot of the teachers that use them are very, very good teachers, are very good people. But what's not thought about and what's not thought out well enough is who is getting trampled down here that we don't even recognize or see. are being impacted by programs like this. Those are my clients. Those are the kids that I'm looking for. I'm not looking at the majority, guys. That's not my job. My job is a civil rights attorney. My job is to sit there and isolate where the oppression is occurring. Okay? So I can turn the majority's attention to that oppression and saying, look, guys, we got to do something about that. We've got to change. And so that's where, on that front, sorry, it got out of focus. And okay, now here we go. All right. So that's where on that front, my job is to constantly be looking for the where the minority, whatever that minority may be, is being overlooked, apathy to where we don't even see you. And my job is to put a spotlight on that, regardless of what it is. And many of us are going to find ourselves in a majority position most of our lives, if not all the time, and are going to view people like me as a nuisance and a hindrance. What the hell is he crying about? Why is he so? Because, guys, if you're in a majority position and you're enjoying always being sort of, on top of the dung pile of life, then, you're not going to see the perspective of other people. You're just not. Why would you? You're not in it, So it's my job to sort of help see that, even though myself may be in a lot of different majority, positions in my life, demographics, whatever, name it. But it doesn't mean that even if I find myself in these majority positions or majority demographics, it doesn't mean that I turn a blind eye to the other people around me, to sit there and because I believe in the Christian ethic, I find that a personal responsibility because of my belief system to constantly be looking around as to who I can help and who needs that help. And, that's where I try to better myself. And it sort of feeds well into what it is that I've committed to do with my life as a civil rights attorney, which I'm so grateful that I am. And I am because of my daughter, who you can hear in the background. So let's soak that in. And then what I'm going to do is have the last segment getting into that behavior plan, the prison or the school to prison pipeline, the dangers of police in schools, and zero tolerance discipline policies. They all sort of clash. They don't need to. And so therefore, once again, the perspective of a lot of parents, especially parents that, let's say, even have children with IEPs but don't come with behaviors, they tend to be extremely judgmental as well toward the children that are disruptive. And I have one of those children that have been disruptive. But it's just not a conducive environment sometimes for her to be in these kind of settings. I acknowledge that. But she's entitled to an education. She's entitled to services. We've just got to find creative, differentiated ways to present that material to her and balance it with the rights of other children and their right to receive an education without behavior impeding their ability to learn. It is a balancing act, guys. But we're doing a crappy job at even just recognizing base emotional and psychological needs of children. All right.